Today on the podcast, we're digging into student agency and the lessons Dr. Annalies Corbin has learned from her work pioneering microschools and portable innovation labs. Who is this Dr. Corbin, you ask? Well, she's the CEO and founder of the PAST Foundation. Let me tell you a little bit about it as I read from their website. From a single school partnership in 2006, Annalies has grown PAST supporters across the nation, building a reputation for both transforming teaching and learning by understanding tomorrow's education needs. In 2015, Annalies' commitment to transforming schools led to the development of PAST Innovation Lab. Connecting directly with teachers through online professional development courses, MAED program, and on-site workshops, PAST Innovation Lab impacts more classrooms and expands learning opportunities for teachers and students everywhere. In 23 years, PAST has impacted more than 2,300,000 students, over 20,000 teachers across 42 states, hosting nearly 20,000 visitors and building hundreds of partnerships. To connect further after the show, you can find Annalies hosting her own podcast, Learning Unboxed, or read her new book, Hacking Schools: 5 Strategies to Link Learning to Life. I think you're going to be really intrigued by the programs the PAST Foundation has put into action and the ways they can be applied to our context here in ELA. So let's dive in. Welcome to the Spark Creativity Teacher Podcast, a podcast for English teachers looking for more. More creativity, more engagement, more joy, and no more scripted curriculum, lesson planning ruts, or boring book lists. I'm Betsy Potash, and I'm honored you're trusting me to help. You're not alone on this creative journey anymore. Well, welcome, Annalies. It's so great to have you here on the podcast. I've just finished your book, Hacking School, and I'm really excited to dive deeper into some of the more innovative approaches inside.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here, and I can't wait for our conversation.
Oh, thanks. So our listeners will have already heard me showcase your many accomplishments in the intro. So rather than have you introduce yourself again, let's start with a little fun kickoff. What's the single most exciting thing you see happening from your perspective in education right now?
I think the most exciting thing for me is the fact that schools are collectively starting to ask themselves, what if? And, that translates into a number of different ways and approaches. But the reality of it is I'm seeing more and more schools across the country in the U.S. and other parts of the world really wrestling with this idea of we don't have to do it the way we've always done it any longer. And so if we are completely reimagining what is it that we want learning to look like in our communities. That gets me really excited because it's work that so desperately needs to be done.
Yes, I couldn't agree more. As I read your book, I found myself nodding along to so much of what you said when you went into the importance of cultural responsiveness and connecting across the disciplines and prioritizing student agency, looking at problem and project-based learning. It's all very exciting to me. I was right there with you. And I thought we could maybe drill down a little bit because there's so much to talk about. But I feel like maybe in this conversation, we could prioritize agency across so many different parts of education. Why do you think that is so important for our kids?
I think the primary reason is because the kids we're teaching today are not the kids that the system many of us are operating within were designed for. And so kids today, we all know they have grown up in an incredibly connected world. They interact with the world in ways that we've not really seen in many cases before. And because of all of this, kids crave autonomy. And that's just part of the growing process anyway. Everybody who's been, an educator for more than 5 minutes absolutely recognizes, especially as our kids get older. But we see it throughout the spectrum of our students' learning journey. They crave the ability to have agency. What I think has changed is that in many ways, students and their families are demanding that agency be built into the educational journey because they're voting with their feet, right? In lots of places in lots of ways. And so agency sets us up for so many positive impacts, not just for the student, but for in our individual classrooms and, quite frankly, long-term in our communities. So in my mind, it's really, really critically important.
Yeah, I agree. And I find that once I center the idea of agency just in my head as I design curriculum, it's actually fun. It's almost like a game. It's like I could give them agency over text. I could give them agency in how they bounce these ideas back to me. I could give them agency in where they sit and whether they wear headphones and whether they work with a partner and who, who they talk to in their research. And it's not in any way limiting. It's freeing.
Oh, it is so freeing. And so many of the teachers that I work with in a variety of different ways, one of the things that I will hear from them, and it's not just about agency, but the other strategies that I talk about as well, ultimately, right, we're going to wrestle with it. We may or may not have been trained to operate our classrooms in this particular manner, whatever it happens to be. But ultimately, when we let go and we embrace these possibilities, it is incredibly freeing for most educators. They're like, I will never go back. This is so much easier. But more importantly, it's so much happier for me as the educator, for my students, for my families. It just creates a completely different environment. The mind shift change is so incredibly dramatic in many cases.
Yeah, because when you're trying to force kids through this one tunnel that everybody has to fit through, then you're going to have so much pushback. You're going to have so much boredom. You're going to feel like you have to differentiate that tunnel to within an inch of its life to allow everybody to even survive it, But if you say, okay, we're going to skip the tunnel. Here's the beach, it's just, it's easier.
Absolutely. And we should all have fun in our day, right?
That's the hope.
It is.
So I know that you get to work with a lot of different teachers, go to a lot of different schools. When you see agency doing its good work, what does that look like in these different contexts? Can you give us some examples?
Sure. The primary thing that I see is an educational setting that is incredibly dynamic. And it's dynamic in the sense that agency is comprehensive in those environments. It's everywhere. It's student to student. It's student to educator. It's student to community. It's across the administration. It's teacher to administration. Agency, when fully encompassing, it's literally everywhere. And so you can see it in the tone and the tenor of conversation. It really comes out in the way that students approach the tasks at hand, the way they think about them, the way they write about them, the products that they produce to demonstrate their knowledge. When agency is fully ensconced in a classroom setting or in a school building or in a community, any type of learning environment, it's visceral.
How lovely.
Yeah.
Let's define a little bit, because I was curious when you say, what is student to student agency?
Yeah, so for me, that's that back and forth. It's interesting, right? Because we talk about, having sets of skills that we want students to learn that go beyond just the standards that we're teaching, right? So we always talk about, collaboration and problem solving, all these things that we need students to go on to be productive citizens in life. They're critically important. And students practice those with each other first and foremost, right? They learn the boundaries around those from the adults in the ecosystem. But the reality is they hone those skills with each other. And so agency has to go all directions, right? And so when I see student to student agency, it's students respectfully arguing, hey, in a group dynamic, for example, well, I really think that we should go this way and not that way. And you can watch that dynamic play out, because as students first start to struggle with that, as their own internal agency in a classroom environment grows, then they'll start to push up against each other's agency as well. And it
Mhm.
becomes this fascinating thing to watch, as an anthropologist, which is what my background is.
Yeah.
Just watching the human interaction grow is a really powerful and tangible thing. And so that student to student agency is as critical as that student to educator agency component is. And in fact, in many ways, it may be more critical because those are boundaries that often have a lower barrier to entry for many students. It's not necessarily the case, but in their own minds, that's what they see. It's that peer-to-peer piece.
Yeah. As somebody who really struggled with group work when I was a kid and found it so frustrating at times, I've thought a lot as a curriculum designer about how to support that type of learning.
Mhm.
When, okay, I have this idea and you have that idea, and where do we go from here?
Mhm.
How do you think teachers can coach students in that evolution, that
Yeah.
growth?
Mhm. It's a tough one, right? Because every environment is a little bit different. But, I get this question frequently as well. Typically, I get it as it relates to how do I evaluate or grade
Mm.
that
Mhm.
piece, right? That's typically what it's leading with. But when you really dig into it, what typically the educators are struggling with is your very question is how do we help the students figure out where the lanes are, if you will, right? That
Yeah.
in which the students are operating inside of that group dynamic. And one of the things that I will typically tell my educators is sometimes the best end result isn't a singular project element, but competing project elements underneath the same umbrella. And what I mean by that is, for example, let's say one of my all-time favorite projects I ever had a group of kids work on was a piece relative the balcony scene in Romeo and Juliet. And my own listeners on my podcast have heard me talk about this particular element before. But one of the things that I loved about it is this incredibly creative and amazing English teacher made the decision because our kids were really struggling with this particular assignment. They couldn't understand the relevance. Agency was really, really being an issue in that space. And ultimately said to the kiddos, okay, well, how would you like to study this text? And so one of the outcomes was, well, let's just translate this into texting. Like, what if instead they texted? This entire scene was a text chat. Well, some students really, really responded well to that, but other students were still struggling even with that. And turns out some of that was some cultural language issues just because of students' backgrounds. And so giving those students the ability to take that same enterprise and turn it into lyrics for a song instead, right? Made all the difference in the world. They were still doing the exact same project, but they were presenting it slightly different. And so that's an example of how you help students navigate within that sort of student-to-student agency piece.
Yeah, I love that. You're looking at the balcony scene. All you
Yeah.
want is for students to understand it. They could do it by text. They could do it by a song. They could turn it into a
So
film
many ways.
scene, a graphic
Yes.
novel, like
So many ways.
podcast. Yeah, and
It's
they
endless.
do what
Yeah.
they want, what they think is interesting, and so then they're going to care.
And it's relevant in that moment, right? Because, the student argument, oh, this isn't relevant to us anymore. Well, that's not true at all, right?
Yeah,
Romeo
ever
and
been in
Juliet
love?
plays out all the time, right? Over and over again. It's endless.
Yeah. Yes. I wanted to step back for a second before we leave this topic of agency and just think a little bit. Since leaving the classroom and becoming an education kind of thinker, writer, curriculum designer, I have treasured having agency in my own work. When I get excited about something, I can go as deep as I want for as long as I want. And that has been very rich for me and meaningful in my personal work. And I imagine that that's the same for you too at the Past Foundation. Am I right? How does that feel for you?
Oh, absolutely. It's the same. It's permission to explore the rabbit holes.
Yeah.
I don't know about you, but for me, right, I get really excited about a thing. And then, oh my gosh, I will investigate, dig, think about, play with, experiment, explore that thing almost to the point that there's nothing left of it on the backside. But to your point, right, that's the thing, right? It's the freedom to be able to say, some things I can just have a glancing blow and that's okay. That's enough for me. But there are other things I want not just need, to spend my time, energy, and effort on in some really, really deep and meaningful ways. And so for me, that's what that kind of agency in my own work provides.
Yeah. Yeah, and I just feel so excited about giving kids that because I just see it in my life. I'll get into a project and just be spending so many hours on it, and it's like, okay, my boss isn't making me do this, right? This is my choice because it's fascinating, and that's what I want students to feel too.
Exactly. Yeah, I agree.
Well, let's talk a little bit about some of the many cool, innovative programs that you've pioneered at the PASS Foundation. I wanted to start with Microschools. I'm very intrigued by this program, but I'm interested in Microschools in general, but I'm especially interested in what teachers listening might be able to pull from the concept of Microschools to use at their schools, because they may not be able to just go start a microschool, right? But I feel sure that there are elements of that program within a program that we could all learn from.
Yeah, and I really appreciate that question. So thank you for that. Because for me, when I think about just from sort of that intellectual perspective of why we decided to spend a tremendous amount of time, energy, and effort in the microschool space, is really for us, it's more about micro learning environments and micro opportunities to learn, right? And if we set aside the idea that a microschool is simply, a bunch of parents during a pandemic bubble saying, I'm going to create this thing. Microschools are so much more than that, but we get hung up by what we've seen in media and not understand really that what it's really talking about is creating these really specific micro opportunities to learn, to go back to what we were just talking about, to spend time really, really deeply going down a rabbit hole or exploring something to both a breadth and a depth that says the students understand it deeply. And it can be a small environment. It can be, based on time. It can be based on location. There are a number of different ways to think about it. And for us, the idea around this notion of microschooling says we want to give kids an opportunity to explore something tangible to the point that they make a decision. I love this. I am kind of indifferent to it. I really, really hate this thing. Because as we think about ultimately sort of our role as educators, getting our students to the point that they leave us, they go off into the world, whatever that happens to mean for an individual learner, and they're going to be a productive citizen in some capacity. They're going to college, they're going to work, they're going to go work for the government, they're going to be a school teacher, they're going to be, work at the local food bank, a whole host of different pieces and parts, right? But we really, really want those students to figure out some of those pieces, those passions, those loves, those dislikes early in their educational journey so that when the opportunity arises to really, really make choices, they can make choices that are based on an experience they've had, not just on something they believe they know.
Yeah, I love that. I'm thinking this ties actually really clearly back to the idea of agency. If you can give them a foundational experience when they're quite young to push them one way or away from that way, then the next time they have to make a choice, they're just getting closer to what's really interesting and fascinating for them.
Absolutely. And I think that for me, to go back to your question about, what can teachers really take away from the work that we're doing in microschools if they don't have the opportunity to open in their own school or in their same community? For us, it's really about grabbing a hold of that idea that I can spend deep and relevant time on something. And one of the things that we always remind educators is that, think about all the things that you have to teach. Look at your standards that you have to address for the entire year. How many of those could be reshuffled and repackaged to give students the opportunity to explore something very deeply and hit multiple buckets of these at a time, right? Or even over time and over again. That's creating those sort of micro school environments.
Let me run something by you. I remember when I was teaching see, I'm trying to remember. I think it was Death of a Salesman. And I was
Mm.
trying to figure out how to engage my students with Death of a Salesman. And it wasn't necessarily relatable to them, but that idea of expressing emotions and dreams on stage could maybe be more relatable. And I had the wonderful opportunity to bring a theater artist into the classroom. And I pretty much let her run class for a week. She just did acting exercises, and they did scenes, and they created sculptures, and then monologues from the meaning behind the sculptures, and all these different things. And I was there, I watched, I learned, but it almost felt like a little theater micro school, right? And then from there, we could take what we learned from her into the rest of our unit.
Absolutely.
Is that idea?
It is, right? If you can't separate out or peel out and say, I'm going to take a particular group of students and we're going to micro school, whatever you want, labels you want to put on that, with them throughout a semester or through a year, right? We're going to weave ourselves all the way through as a cohesive group. The ability to do exactly what you did in your classroom, that is 100% creating a micro learning environment. It's very specialized. It's very tangible. It's got really specific outcomes. But most importantly, what I would argue based on the example that you provided is that it had tangible results that carried through to the next thing because you chose to use it over and over again. You pulled out the things from that moment and then you allowed it to sort of direct and be applied into the next experience you wanted to have with your students. That's exactly what you can get out of those micro environments.
Wonderful. Well, I want to roll forward now and give you the same question for another wonderful, innovative program at the Pass Foundation. And this one just was so appealing to me, this idea of a portable innovation lab. It sounds very STEMmy. It's going to come across very STEM to our ELA listeners, but I can really picture different sorts of innovation labs that maybe could apply to ELA too. So let's talk about what this program is and how we might apply it.
Absolutely. So first and foremost, I'm going to start with all of the innovation labs. Yes, they are STEMmy, but they are all literacy infused, and we'll come back to that. That's by design. They're also all mathematics infused as well, again by design. Yeah. But these, the idea here is that a lot of schools they really want to have their students do a deep and meaningful advanced experience, but sometimes we don't have the resources. We don't have the stuff in our classrooms. So let me give you an example. Drones. So drones, super cool. Kids really love the technology. There are schools that you're not allowed to have them at all for a variety of reasons. Teachers can't have them. Schools aren't even willing to consider buying classroom sets of drones. In other places, they do have these. So what would happen if I could use drones and drone technology, because kids are super interested in drones, as a mechanism to teach a lot of different things. I could teach the technology. I could teach flight. I could teach all the elements that go for that. But I could also teach marketing. I could teach creative writing using drones. I could do all kinds of things if I had access to that resource, but I might not. So in partnership with one of our local industries, Battelle, we created the Portable Innovation Labs program, and it's a statewide program that is a lending library based. There's 10 hubs around the state of Ohio, and teachers, both formal and informal, can log on to their local hub where these have been placed, see what's available, and then basically check out the entire crate. And they're not a box, they're not a kit, right? They're these big crates. So for example, if you're checking one out that has to do with drones, it's going to have a classroom set of drones in it. It's going to have all the curriculum, all the standards aligned for whatever it is that you have to teach. They're going to be grade level appropriate. It's going to have all of the activities and the modules that you would run, an opportunity for you to provide feedback and to then inform the greater collective about, well, I also then adapted it to do this, X, Y, or Z. They work like that. And like I said, they're all literacy infused. They're all mathematics infused. And they cross the spectrum of grade levels. So for example, one of my favorite ones is fairy tale forensics. The little kids love that one. Oh my gosh, it's so much fun.
Wow.
And there are a range of things. So we partnered up, for example, with a education media company called Ad Astra Media. And we've co-written, designed, and developed developed and done all of the curriculum and the module activities around early career exploration for our youngest pre-K through grade 2 in all these different STEM fields. A lot of our work is in fact in STEM, but it's recognizing that STEM is just a foundational piece and that we need all of the other elements layered over the top of it, right? We need the arts, we need culture, we need language, we need expression, all of those pieces and parts. And so it just becomes a vehicle for us. But we're really trying to expose students in that case, to all these different career choices. So we co-created a set of books called Good Night Littles, Good Night Little Farmer, Good Night Little Astronomer, Good Night Little Mining Engineer, right? Things like that, right? Yeah. And then, so these boxes will come with all of this stuff to be able to do that as an example.
Lovely. Oh, man. Well, that's so fabulous. I love the idea. And I can also pretty quickly spin from there how English teachers might collaborate across a district to create a portable book club set. Maybe they can't afford to have 6 fabulous sets of contemporary novels for their 10th graders. But if they put their budget together with 5 other schools and they each used it during a different 6-week period of the year, then they could.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it is definitely that idea of resource sharing, right? Yeah. And it was also a way to say, look, I don't know about in the communities that your listeners are coming from, but in most communities we've got schools, especially if you're in larger areas where you've got more affluent students. The budgets in those schools are bigger, right? And then you've got less affluent areas. The budgets are smaller. The resources are less. And so it became a mechanism by which we could equalize those disparities.
Yeah. All the districts together get 20 microphones for a podcasting unit. And then any school can check them out. Yeah. That's so cool. I mean, the fact that yours come with all the layers of curriculum and the fundamental principles are extra lovely. But the concept is very borrowable.
Oh, 100%. I would love to see places do exactly what you're suggesting, right? Because it is really remarkable. And in the case of ours, they all come back after they've been checked out. They get cleaned up, they get sorted. If something's missing, it gets replaced, it goes back out. It's a whole unit again, right?
What a wonderful service.
Yeah.
Well,
all for free.
An extra wonderful service when it's all for free. I wanted to ask you, as we finished up here today, about learning spaces, because it's something that's always on my mind. And when we first spoke, you had this lovely background on your video of the model learning lab of the PASS Foundation behind you. And so I just want to bring your expertise in the learning space area to the English classroom. What would your dream English classroom be like?
Well, I think it is highly variable, right? Based on the needs of a particular community. But for me, because you asked what was my dream space, my dream space is cozy, right? When I think about the opportunity, and for me, I love everything about reading. I love everything about writing, right? That's just who I am as an individual, right? And for me, there was nothing greater than being lost in a book. The story, it could be fiction, it could be nonfiction. There was just so much going on, right? And so the ability to feel like that the learning and the physical space was part of the immersive space that I was in on the pages in my own mind. So for me, that particular space would be one that was conducive to allowing my personality, my brain, my emotions to flow with whatever I was experiencing and whatever I was reading. And so a place that's comfortable, a place that's conducive to conversation and collaboration, a place that will allow me to express myself in a variety of meaningful ways. That's what that space would look like for me.
Sounds pretty great.
Yeah.
Well, we are for sure going to link up to your book and your podcast in our show notes today, but where else can people go if they want to learn more about you and the PASS Foundation and all the great work you're doing?
Sure. I mean, the best place to get information about the work that we're doing is obviously, at the website pastfoundation.org, and it's PAST, pastfoundation, .org. But the other places, you can find me on LinkedIn. You can find me at Annalies Corbin on Instagram. So we put out a tremendous amount of information, the majority of which we just make available to anybody that wants it. And, honestly, I just love it when people reach out to sort of share about their own experiences, what they're working on, what they're wrestling with, because those conversations help us choose the direction and the things that we focus on next as an organization.
Wonderful. Thank you, Annalies.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks so much for joining us today. Until next time, take care of yourself and stay creative.